bud. Welcome in Between Two Burns episode.
I don't know if we count this as 8, 9, 7. I don't know because the
somewhere
Stogies.
in there. The Stogies was a different episode, which was fun, which is interesting because the gentleman who's joining us was a recent winner of a Stogie Award.
How does it feel to win a Stogie?
It feels amazing. I got to be honest.
I
wish that you had a small trophy that I could put above my mantle that I just
see. The problem is we looked at trophies, but all the cigar trophies looked a little flaccid.
Yeah, they were not something that you would want to display anywhere. We gave Franklin a certificate, which I do believe he's going to put in his office at Laudisi. I'm not sure that's a great thing to be putting behind the desk, is that you've been rotating through jobs recently, but especially with your newest employer. But I think we probably get you a certificate or something, wherever you want to hang it.
I'll send you a jar of Duke's mayo and a bottle of Bojangles honey mustard to go with it.
Dude, that honestly, you don't have to send me the trophy if you send me those two things. That would be those are two things we don't get in the North, Bojangles and Duke's, which are two premier condiments.
Well, before we get too far down the mayonnaise rabbit hole, let's officially introduce our guest, Mr. Mike Martello, at Leisure Leaf Cigars on the Instagram. Tat guy, is that okay? You're
definitely a tat guy.
Tat guy, Tatuaje fan. You've done things with Tatuaje. You did a live with Pete at the end of the year. Was it just before Christmas or just after the first of the year?
Yeah, at the end of the year, it became something that we started doing. I guess like this past year was the third year now that we've done it. But Pete has been gracious enough to agree to do a tat recap at the end of every year with me, and people have started to catch on to it, and they've really sort of enjoyed it. And we always aim to try and do about 2 hours, but it always ends up going to be like 4 to 5.
Yeah.
Which is it's very intense. Like you kind of lose track of time, and but Pete's always like very forthcoming, and Mo usually mediates for me because I have like a problem with the questions and everything else coming up on a live Instagram feed. But it's something that we've been doing for a while, and I hope we can keep continuing to do.
Well, in that honor, Ethan grabbed us cigars. We knew you weren't smoking tonight. You're not smoking. It's freezing cold out where you're at. You're in New Jersey. Am I right in saying that?
Yes.
Yeah, he's in New Jersey. But he picked us Tatuajes. Tell us what we're smoking.
So we're both smoking Konu 2012. Last year, Tatuaje came out with 2 new wrapper leaves for that cigar. So that's what you're smoking. One of those. You're smoking the Corojo Konu 2012. Shade-grown Corojo wrapper, Nicaraguan binder and filler. And I'm smoking the original Habano, which is one of my favorites.
Yeah. It's fantastic. So tell me a little bit.
That's a great cigar.
Tell me a little bit how the relationship with Pete got started.
Well, sorry about this. I just want to make sure that's connected. I think that the relationship with Pete got started because I was bored one day, like when I started smoking cigars, and I didn't really have a connection to the industry. Like none of my friends smoked cigars, and like my close friends, and I was kind of the odd man out. But I have a photography background, and I started taking a lot of different photos of cigars that I was smoking. So I initially started it with just like my phone camera and taking photos and doing little reviews, and then later on I just kind of went to straight photography and started taking photos. And I would tag Pete a lot, and Pete kind of took notice of the photos. And then one day I was brazen enough to kind of ask him a couple questions about some things, and to my surprise, he responded. And I'm also good friends with Mo, who is the Tatuaje rep for New Jersey and the New York area here in the North. And Mo had me on one of his lives once, and I think just like the symbiotic connection between everything, like me being a tat guy, being friends with Mo, being in love with the product, I think that all of that just kind of turned into us seeing one another more at events, having like actual conversations, and then that turning into more of a professional acquaintance rather than just like some guy on Instagram. Like tagging him in photos.
Yeah. I will say it's been our experience. We've done some different things in the past. He's maybe one of the most uh generous people with his time
Mm-hmm.
and energy in
Mm-hmm.
the cigar business, if that makes sense. Like we did
The hurricane relief
we did a
raffle.
hurricane relief raffle with the Wolfman
Yep.
cigars. He was kind enough to send us a second box, one of the second number boxes for free. We were able to use that to, raise some money and everything like that. So like he's always super generous with the time. If we want to collaborate on a post or something like that, he's always willing to do that. So he's always very, very generous with his time when it comes to this stuff.
Yeah, it's he really is generous with his time because I think that he genuinely wants the general public to be more educated or to understand the craft a little bit more. And I remember before I even knew who Pete Johnson was, like when I first started my Instagram, I knew very little about cigars, and I had smoked a an Ambos Mundos
Oh
Habano,
yeah.
and I remember saying, like, why do they call it Habano if it's not Cuban? And the person who responded to me was Pete Johnson.
No
And
kidding.
yeah, he explained to me why they call it a Habano wrapper, why there are differentiations and different varietals of tobacco that make things taste differently and how they work with blends. And I looked him up. I actually Googled him at one point because I was like, who is this guy? Um, and then I saw that he was the owner of Tatuaje Cigars, and I was like, that's pretty cool in this industry that guys are so connected to their brand and what's happening that you could just ask a question randomly on the internet, and the guy that responds is the brand owner.
Oh
But
yeah,
he's
absolutely.
one of the few people that he has his finger on the pulse of that stuff, and he's very involved in the social media community as much as he is the cigar industry. So
Yeah.
it's refreshing.
When it comes to regards to like Tatuaje as a cigar in general, you're obviously a huge fan, and that preceded the relationship with Pete. Was it a
Mm.
matter of just like what Tatuaje does kind of just hit you right in your sweet spot, basically, like trying cigars? Like, how long have you been smoking cigars?
I've been smoking cigars about 10 years. Um, I would say that with Tatuaje, it's just what, I don't know, it's just what kind of like meets all the standards of my palate when I light a cigar. Like there's a very particular taste when I light a cigar that I look for, and more often than not, um, I would say pretty regularly, Tatuaje cigars hits that parameter. There's like this very rich, savory, balanced sweetness and flavor profile that I always find with their cigars. And I know that it's my father's tobacco, but I don't fall in line as much with my father's stuff as I do with Tatuaje's stuff.
Yeah,
And
that. Yeah.
I
I'm the.
like.
Go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
I was just gonna say I'm the same way, which is funny, and I'd be curious. I don't even know if I've ever talked with you about this before. I'd be curious how many tack guys are also like that. Like I gravitate towards Brown Label and Fausto and Havana 6 before I do anything else really in the my father line. And it's not that my father makes bad cigars; they make great cigars, obviously. But the way that Pete blends the tobacco, I'm with you, fits my palate a little bit better. But I wonder how many other people are out there that are like that.
Yeah, that would be an interesting poll. The thing for me is that like I also have a background as a chef. So like I've been a chef. I was a chef 10 years prior to me getting into the cigar industry. And I often attribute like cigar blenders and manufacturers very much like chefs, like brand owners. Like everybody has either their own signature or they have a very particular thing that makes their cigar what their cigar is. And I don't think that it's they're working with the same ingredients, but they're getting a different product. And I think that speaks volumes between Tatuaje and my father, and why the collaboration like La Union was such a interesting thing for them to do, because now they're blending for each other based on what they know about each other.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, I'm going to presume that you smoked it. What did you think of that?
I the my father for Tatuaje blend, I was really surprised by because it's one of the first times that I really sort of understood what people were talking about the pepine pepper blast at any point, because I had never really experienced that before. A lot of people used to say that like it was just pepper, pepper, pepper. But anytime that I smoked a my father's cigar, that wasn't ever my initial reaction. But this one for Tatuaje, there was an abundance of that up front. And I thought it was a really great representation of Habano. The Tatuaje cigar from my father, the Corojo one, I loved.
Yeah.
Um, because it was it was different and familiar all at the same time. It was very unique in the way that the blend kind of complemented the wrapper and vice versa. But I really got like a rich nuttiness off of that I haven't experienced with a lot of other cigars before. And it burned well and it performed well and it was enjoyable all the way through. So, it's definitely a cigar that I would buy again.
Yeah, and I'll be interested to see. We're expecting it
Well,
in the next.
No,
Oh.
I did I not tell you this?
No,
Oh.
breaking news to me.
So I talked to I think I texted you this, Mike. I talked to my father rep last week and asked her what was going on with it, because they had the announcement that the Honduran my father's being
which would be very interesting.
released at PCA. And she told me that they ended up not sending all 300 boxes of the black overseas, and so they actually have another 150 boxes that they have to sell through. And so they are going to sell through those boxes before they release the red. So I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see it until next year.
The red's coming in 2026,
yeah,
not 2025. Yeah. I mean, that's just the reality of it. Because there was only how many boxes total of the black?
There were 1,500, 1,200 for the States and 300 for overseas, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so you've got roughly 10% of that.
Yeah.
Still remaining. That's
I told the rep, I said, that's a tough thing. And she was like, yeah, well, when red comes out, people are going to want black. And I was like, it's $60. Like, they're going to take that $120 they have and buy one of each of the new one. They're not going to spend $240 on all this, the whole set.
Because the black just didn't. It was good. I agree with Mike. Like my father for Tatuaje was, in my opinion, not as good as the tat for my father, but neither of them were something that I think, like, if people saw them, in some random corner of some cigar shop, they're going to be like, I want all of them. I mean, it didn't turn out to be some legendarily good cigar.
Yeah, and I think price had a lot to do with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's funny. I was thinking about the sales, at least at our store, of that cigar, and we sold through the initial couple boxes really fast, and then we had that one box that there were 10 of each left, and they sat on the shelf for months.
Mm-hmm.
And all the geeks and everybody had gotten their fill of it, and it was $60, and they just didn't want any more.
Yeah, the same thing will happen with the red one.
Yeah,
and just like if it was, excuse me, if it was as, when she says, "Oh, they want the black ones," like, we would be asking for, like, all right, give us another box, then we'll take another box or two boxes if that demand was there. I mean,
I genuinely think if the cigar was $25 retail,
it would fly off the shelves. That's
that we could justify getting another box or two, and honestly putting one back until red came in.
Yeah, and then doing
a side by side release,
Absolutely.
Which would be really cool. Y'all didn't have them at your store, did you, Mike?
No, we didn't have that particular release. We get most of the other ones, but that one was kind of elusive. There was I got mine from a shop about a half hour from here that I'm real friendly with, and that's where I picked them up and got to smoke them. And to your point, I think that one of the things people have to be mindful of is that, like, when the price tag goes up on a cigar, they're not gonna leave the shelf as fast as the other cigars that you get allocated to you or that are in a more affordable price range. I mean, luxury cigars are on the rise, but I don't think that they're the future, the bread and butter of.
No, I don't either.
Yeah, it's an experience. I think that people will pay for the experience. But I don't necessarily think that it's not everybody that's going to buy a box of that.
Yeah, we talked about that briefly about, your Flor de las Antillas smoker or your Tat Brown Label smoker. They're used to buying $10 to $13 cigars. They're not going to spend $60 multiple times over to get this cigar. They'll try it one time because it's got Tatuaje's name on it. But like you said, it's an experience. And once you've experienced it one time, unless it was one of your favorite cigars, I mean, you can buy 6 Flor de las Antillas and 5 tap brown labels for the price of one of those cigars.
Right.
Yeah, I think like for somebody like me that smokes a cigar every day or multiple cigars a day, depending on the day, you know, like I'll smoke a brown label seventh Habano, 5 or 6 times over, before I buy multiples of a $65 cigar that I thought was good, just because I know that that's at least a week's worth of cigars for me if I'm going to smoke one a day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep. We were talking about the stogies earlier, and this could get a little off track. And we gave our cigar of the year to the AJ 20th. Have you had a chance to try it?
I have smoked that cigar. I
Are
thought
you?
it was very AJ. There's a very particular flavor profile that comes off AJ cigars, I think, with whatever cigar that you smoke. And I thought it was a very good cigar. Um, I, I don't think that I would give it my number one.
All right.
Um,
Well, give me your number one. What was the best cigar you had last year? New cigar, something you had not smoked before.
yeah. So I think that that's a good way to go about this, is like talking about cigars that weren't around or like that were released in that particular year for them to be uh, quantifiable for this. And I think that Kyle Gellis did a really good job with the G, the Corona Gorda that he released with the G on it through his Drop Cigar
Is that
Club.
is
And
that
like,
is that Gellis Family Reserve? Is that what that one was?
Yeah, you're not talking about the Moravis. You're talking about the one that he did through Drop.
yeah, it was a 10 count box. It was a
Oh,
Corona
Yeah.
okay.
Gorda.
Yep.
Yeah, but I think they were in the same. They might not have been completely the same blend, but they had that logo on it, and it was a 10 count box, kind of done the same way. But I think that that was probably one of the most interesting cigars, or one of the best experiences I had.
We've, I'm sure Ethan's told you, we've become over time big fans of Warped, like what he's doing. We kind of talked about it on the last pod, which is like there is a dedication from him still that you don't see a lot, if that makes sense. Like there's that craftsmanship. There's a handful of people who still very much are about like I need to touch it, I need to feel it, I need to see it. I want like this and that, and not just hey, I need a Maduro wrapper. It needs to be medium plus, a little bit of spice, Nicaraguan. Here's the bands, throw it on there. Let's see what we got.
Yeah, I think that Kyle, since he's gone to La Isla,
Mm-hmm.
I think that it has changed his perspective, and I think that it has changed his overall uh, appearance to the cigar world, because I knew Warped as a very particular thing. You know what I mean? I knew Warped as like Aganorsa. I knew it as either Corojo or Criollo wrapper. I knew it as relatively similar blends, and they kind of bled together for me. There was a lot of stuff that he did that kind of felt like, I understand that this is Warped, but I don't understand what I'm getting from this blend that I don't get from the other blend.
Right. Well,
And
and
then,
it always felt like Aganorsa. I didn't mean to cut you off there, but
yeah,
it always felt for a long time that it felt so similar that it was, all in a lot of cases almost, indiscernible. And I agree with you. When he started shifting away, I don't want to say completely different, because there's still that vibe is there, certainly, but there's clearly a line of, what's the word? Delineation. Is that the correct word?
Separation. Yeah.
We'll call it separation. We'll
Yeah.
go with the ACT words. Uh, there's this clear line of separation of where something different has happened. It's not drastically different. It's not like going from Aganorsa and then, getting those pepper bombs from my father or something like that. But there's been this shift towards something a little bit different, a bit more creative. My guess is probably a bit more him, if that makes sense. Because I get it. Like if you start out, you're starting this company small, just, for all intents and purposes, there's office people and stuff like that, but it's just him. Right. So there is this safety in like,
You know what you know,
you know what you know.
and
Here's
you
what
know what
you
you're gonna get.
correct. Here's
Yep.
what you guys do, right? You do it well. I want to do it well as well. So like give me something, let's do something, similar to like that. And then as he grows, the popularity, his respect, and admiration within the group, it starts to like, all right, I know what I'm doing here. I can branch out a little bit. I've people, look at what I do here. Like it's okay for me to kind of
Yeah.
to get my hands and mingle it a little bit.
I feel like La Colmena had a lot to do with that
Great cigar.
because it was made at El Teton. Yeah, it probably has some Aganorsa tobacco in it, but it had some Dominican tobacco in it as well, if I'm not mistaken. But that cigar, like anytime somebody brought up Warped, it was La Colmena, La Colmena. And Black Honey was also a part of that, right?
Yep,
The
yep.
limited edition that he
Yeah, I
did.
agree.
And now it's like, okay, now you've got your Nicaraguan stuff, but now we've got Gellis family Moravas. We've got Ala de Cocodrilo. Obviously, the 10th anniversaries last year were great. Saunter was really good. Halfwell just rated that well. And he's doing a great job. And I think I've told you, Mike, but the next Gellis family cigar that's coming out, it's a box press Robusto. We should have it this month.
Oh, nice.
And I think he's actually doing two sizes, but I actually got to smoke the Robusto. And from what he told me, it's 100% sun-grown tobacco.
Was that the one he sent?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. And it was phenomenal. And I think you brought it up, Mike, that that it may have been pre-released in drop. And
Yeah.
they're like $14.50. I think they are 10 or 15 count boxes. I can't wait to see what your opinion's going to be on it, but also the general public and consumer opinion, because I thought it was awesome, but it was also very different, which is, like we've talked about on here, the innovation that I like in the industry. It's not the same thing with a wrapper, binder, filler leaf, flip flopped. You know what I mean?
You two could better answer this question for me, because you two both are far more immersed in the culture of it than I am. Does he often use like drop as I don't want to say testing ground, because that would be unfair that he would be dropping something that he just wants to see how it is. But I mean, has it been common for something to come through drop and then make its way into a full-fledged production cigar?
That's a question for you, Mike, because I honestly don't know.
I mean, as far as I know, and I'll say that I don't know a ton about like what his mission is with drop. I think that like it's a way to get, for people that are on the mailing list that follow him, to understand like what it is that he's trying to do. I think it's a way for him to give you a taste of what's going on in a small allocation before he goes ahead and puts it out to the masses. I think it's for the people, the same way a lot of cigar clubs are. I think it's a way for people that are following him specifically to realize what's coming out before they have to go and try and find it in stores or have an opportunity to get it and go and get it in stores. And I think that the thing that he's doing with drop, going back to what we were talking about between Warped and Gellis family cigars, I think it speaks volumes that he, during Warped, it was a very particular time. I forget what his tagline was with Aganorsa, but it was like something like
it was exclusively different, wasn't it? Or was
Yes.
that is that the new one now?
No, that's
it was
yeah,
exclusively
no.
different.
Yeah.
But this new tagline, I don't know if there is a new tagline or not, but his name is on the cigars now. You know
That's
what I
right.
mean? Like
Yep.
I feel like with something like that comes maturity and confidence, and there's a very particular, when I was a chef, everything that you put out, if your name was on the door, was important, because you were putting that out to the general public and it had your name on it. So no matter who was cooking it or who was touching it, when that person received it, the last thing that they were going to associate it with was you. And now he's got this cigar out there that has his last name on it, and he's even calling it Gellis Family Cigars. And there are certain blends that he pushes in that direction, and there are other ones that he still pushes to the warp direction. And I think that there's that was intentional. I think that there's definitely something about the way that he's grouping what he's doing as Kyle Gellis now and what he was doing as Kyle Gellis then, and making those two things work for him.
Yeah, I agree with you. I hadn't thought about that before, but I agree with you. And he may not be trying to do this, and this is going to sound hoity-toity, but the Gellis family stuff, in my opinion, is a little bit more nuanced than what the Warp stuff is. right?
Yeah.
So the Moravas, the Saunter, the Peace Unique, all in that Gellus family. This new one that's coming out is the same way, albeit a little bit more full bodied. But then you looked at what came out for Warped last year, and you had Sarto, you had Bits of Havana. Ala de Cocodrilo was a bit of a differentiation from that, but you know, the Corto, which made top 25, the Devil's Hand, Nicotina, all that stuff is more medium to full body, but it's very straightforward in my opinion, and that's not a bad thing. You get what you get, right? Like, you know what it's going to be.
Yeah.
Whereas the Gallus family stuff, it does have that nuance to it. It's more medium bodied. It's a cigar you want to sit down and pay it a lot of attention to. And I feel like, looking at the grouping of them, that's what I'm seeing. Now, I don't know if that's what he's doing, obviously, but that's just the way I see it at the moment.
Well, I would say too that I think that he has this commonality or this theme with time, not just like in the fact that he's a big watch guy, or like, that Piece Unique was named after a very particular, what they used to call very high-end watches, or like a very unique watch. But when you look at the Moreva stuff, even at 1250, that's their MSRP, is like their 1250, and then or the Corona Gorda was, and then the Morevas are a little bit less than that. He's taking time to age these cigars before they go out to the general public. So like now he's got a year's worth of time in a cedar box, or he's got a year plus time with certain things. And I think that this commonality or this theme between time with him, even if he doesn't talk about it, is something that he's thinking about. But I could be jumping the gun and looking into it too much. But that's just what I've noticed with the Gellus family stuff, and the time that he takes for it to be considered a luxury product, or what he wants to consider a luxury product. The Warp stuff still has that old flavor mentality. Like, it's a little bit more bold. It's a little bit more in your face. It's like what you're used to in terms of like when he's using Nicaraguan tobacco. But even Sardo was a big departure from some of the other Warp stuff that we had seen throughout.
New
Sardo,
factory
for sure.
New
Sardo
factory
felt different than the other stuff, and I'm sure that was intentional.
Yeah, it had the Omatep tobacco in it, and it was made at Naxa, if I'm not mistaken. More full bodied.
Naxa?
Yeah, that's where Saka gets all his stuff.
Okay,
made.
gotcha.
And if I'm wrong on that, I'm sorry, but I'm 99% sure that's where it's being made.
Ain't nobody fact checking you, bro.
Yeah, you're right. But all really good. But to the point of drop, I think that drop and SNS, which is Tat's fan club, are different, because I feel like Pete does play around a little bit with this is what could be coming. Like Veracruz Blue comes to mind. That was one of the cigars in a specific size. It does
feel like a prerequisite to something coming
in SNS. And that's not always the case. Obviously, SNS is 5 different cigars every year. But I can't think of anything outside of Gellus family that went on drop to that then became a regular release, right? And with that being said, too, we've actually had the opportunity to have some drop cigars here in the shop. The Bird on a Rose cigar that we had, that was a drop exclusive cigar that he had extra boxes of, and he, the retailers that he was close with, they were able to purchase them.
That was less, hey, the response on drop was unbelievable, I want to make it like this, and more so like, I have more of this.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and
allow
it to some general
get it out there.
People outside of the drop community. Okay, gotcha. Interesting.
Yep. But with that being said, I want to talk about something, Mike, that you and I have talked a lot about, and you just brought it up with Warped, with the time thing, and that's aged cigars, right?
Yeah.
And the reason I want to talk about this is because for those that are listening, the reason that you and I really kind of got to know each other was twofold. One, you wanted to open your own store, and so you wanted to talk about what it's like to run a cigar store. And two, you were a master, in my opinion, of finding old shit. The crusty dusties that have been in people's humidors for the last 10 years. And you and I very much so bonded over that, finding old Tatuaje that was Aganorsa made, old Padillas, all this crazy ass stuff. And
let's keep Padilla out of this, please.
Sorry. But I want to talk a little bit about that because I feel like you and I can speak on whether or not it's worth aging cigars. And that's a question that we get here in the shop a decent amount. I had that question asked to me last week. Should I age a cigar? And I don't know if you run into that question much at your store, but I think it's a common question that people have because there's this allure to aged cigars, and people think that having an aged cigar makes it better, but that's not always the case. And obviously, it's very cigar dependent. And Kyle does a very good job of, that extra year adds a layer of complexity and nuance to it. But what happens when you smoke a cigar that's 10 years old or 15 years old? And I kind of wanted to talk with you about that, how you found them, if you're willing to reveal your secrets, and what drew you to smoking aged cigars versus new cigars. Was it, you wanted to smoke something you missed out on because you weren't smoking cigars then, or was it the flavor, or, what was it?
I think it's a little bit of both. I also think that, like, in order to find all this stuff, I think the word that you're looking for is obsessed or obsessive.
That would be that's the one.
Yeah.
I don't think that normal people stay up at night or like in their free time and they're just searching how many different ways they could put a certain grouping of words until something of substance comes up, or might
when you tell me you found a shop in Hawaii that had
that's
some
that
old
was
shit.
that's the next question I was going to ask. It was because I remember this. That was what?
That was during COVID.
That was during COVID.
That was
Early COVID. That was 3 years ago.
Yeah. That was as you and I were kind of
if Mike
talking
was the
every
one,
week.
because there was famously was it Pepin Blue firecrackers in there? Was that one of the ones that you got from Hawaii,
that
or was
wasn't one of the ones. No,
there was something very special in the Hawaiian stuff that you found.
Oh, there was a box of original release El Centurion.
That's what it was. Okay,
that I bought that, but it was from this guy, and you had found it may have been Padilla 8 and 11. I can't remember.
It was this guy's name is Bernie.
By the way, Bernie's Instagrams,
of course,
is
Bernie.
nutso.
Really,
Bernie,
amazing.
Bernie.
I gotta follow Burn, man.
Bernie posts pictures of AI generated scantily clad women smoking cigars for no reason, and it's incredible.
It was called I think
it was Havana Club Honolulu, wasn't it, or something like that?
Yes, Havana Club Honolulu. And I found this website, and being up late at night, I'm a night owl. I don't sleep a lot of the time. Like, I'm awake during the nighttime, and during the day I kind of drag ass. But
it's a hell of a way to go.
That's why we have 16 milligrams in, buddy.
Yeah, exactly.
No, good Lord, you two.
Which I'll put one in right now. Have that?
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. That's the Swedish shit too. That's the good stuff, baby.
So, I mean, when I found the website, what I did was he's got this weird catalog. It's not organized. It's just up there. It's just all these links, and it's just all this different stuff. And I started going through it all, and I noticed that all the labels that were on the cigars I was looking at were the original labels. And I was like, I don't know if this is going to be the thing that I hope it is, but I'm willing to put out $200 and see where it gets me. Because if it hits me with gold, then I know exactly what I should do. And it turned out that the box that came to me the first time I ordered, the box that I ordered was actually a 50 count cabinet of Don Pepin Blue Exquisitos, which they, I think, stopped making in that size cabinet in 2008. And that's when the box was from, somewhere around that time.
Them.
Yeah.
I thought I gave you
of the Exquisito?
Yeah.
Maybe if I have forgotten, I didn't even know that was the size that they did at one point.
It was an unbelievable size.
Yeah, I think that they started coming back out with it now. It's the Corona Gorda size, but like they never did it in a 50 count box after that particular time frame. And when it showed up on my door, I had to talk to this guy. So I found the shop name online, And then I found the phone number and I called and he happened to answer. And I was like, I just ordered this stuff. What else do you have that's like this? And he sent me a whole spreadsheet of stuff that he had from 2005 to like 2015, like just spanning this frame. And I got in trouble with my wife because I put like $1,300 worth of cigars on a credit card.
All I can see is that video with the guy who spends $1,200 on Pokemon Go. And she's like, "Are people spending $1,200? Like, if they want to catch them all, they are. Like, if they want to get all of them, they are."
So, so I'm very much that guy. When it comes to like, and when I do deep dives and like when I go down a rabbit hole, like there's not a lot of stuff that can stop me. And to your point earlier, to your question earlier, was it because I missed out on stuff or I wanted to see how it was? It was a little bit of both, because there are some things that I missed out on during that time frame. And there was also part of me that knew the new cigar. Like I knew what they smoked like now. I knew what they were like fresh, but I had never had them aged. And some of the ages that were coming back on these cigars were like, they were 13, 14, 15 years old on some of these boxes. And that's kind of how the Instagram started to really pick up followers and stuff too, was me doing these unboxings of these cigars that people hadn't seen in 13, 14 years, or at least not with this much age on it. And they had interest in knowing what it tasted like. And what I've realized, or what I've come to realize, is that they're not completely different from the cigars that are fresh. It's just a different representation because of what time has done to the tobacco while it's been sitting there. Like the one thing that I found most interesting was, because my father was once exclusively with Aganorsa, and then that famously dissolved into my father becoming my father. A lot of the stuff that I got from the guy in Hawaii was all my father and Tatuaje product that happened during the Aganorsa period.
So, okay, gotcha.
So that to me was completely new. But it was very, very much Aganorsa, like not like Aganorsa tobacco, because they have a very particular flavor to their tobacco. Ethan and I have talked about it a lot. There is this very familiar, like peach-like sweetness to their tobacco, especially after it's aged for a while. And that is something that totally rang through when I smoked those cigars. But I'll also say that like I don't hoard them. The funny thing is that I'll spend that amount of money on them, but then I'll hand them out when I go to events or like when I go to other places.
Can confirm you are one of the most generous people I've ever met with cigars.
Ethan does the same thing. Ethan does the same thing. Anything that you might send or he buys from other retailers, I get, he's always willing, and frankly forces them on you. It's actually uncomfortable.
I do.
You have to say that. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I want you to have my steak.
It's really generous, but like it's a conversation starter more than anything else, because I've always said two things. One of them is that if there's 24 cigars in a box, that means you have 23 times to offer at least one to somebody else. Like, because me knowing what that cigar tastes like and you not, and me talking about it, it kind of makes me a dick. Like you should be able to experience the same thing I'm experiencing so that we can have a conversation about it. And so that there's a broader understanding between all of us about how good that cigar is and why, or like just to geek out over something else. Because I think that that's one of the greatest things about cigars anyway, is the fact that it's a great equalizer, right? That's what my friend Mo always says. It's the great equalizer. No matter who you are, no matter what you do, when you go into the cigar lounge and you have a cigar in your hand, the only thing that you guys want to talk about is, hey, how is that? Is it smoking well? Should I try it? And you talk with somebody that could be, a king or a garbage man, but it's all relevant when you're sitting in the lounge and you guys are enjoying a cigar together.
Absolutely. Yeah. What's the longest that you have intentionally aged a cigar? Like I have a bunch of aged cigars at home, It's because I stuck them in there and I never remembered they weren't important. That's a bad word to say, but they weren't prestigious enough to remember about them. So they've been sitting there for a while. What's the longest you said, I'm putting this away, I want to see what it's like in X?
Uh, Longest was close to 5 years. Um, and
Patience.
that was the Tatuaje TAA 2020 release, or I think that was the
Great cigar.
52nd.
That was a great
Um,
cigar.
yeah, that was a great cigar. Sumatran wrapper, which he had not done with the TAAs before, and a very particular size. He changed the labeling on it because I believe, if I'm not mistaken, and if I'm wrong, I'm sure somebody will find me and tell me. But
Nah,
the
you're good, dog.
Don't nobody listen to
but
this.
the I think that Pete had teetered with the idea of not doing TAA releases anymore, so that this particular release was supposed to be special. He wet packed them in gold foil. They had a very different box than what they had had before. They usually are just like slide lid type boxes, and this one had a hinge. It was finished wood. Everything was outlined in gold. But I had bought a couple boxes, and I remember that when I first smoked it, I was like, this cigar is an ass kicker. Like, it is bold, it is full, it is strong, it is rich, but all the flavors were kind of like at level 10, or like, in Spinal Tap where they're just like, it goes to 11. Well, this cigar went to 11 when you first smoked it. And that was one of the first initial cigars that I thought to myself, I'm going to put this down for a little while and see what happens to it. And I think that in the aging process is the most interesting thing to me. Is I don't age cigars because I think that the aging is going to make them taste better. I age cigars when I think that the tobacco is strong enough that it can really mellow out with a little bit of time and it can be more enjoyable down the road. But that doesn't mean I don't touch it for like 2 years, 5 years, 6 years and test it then. It's like I'll wait 6 months, 1 year, year and a half, two
Yeah.
years, and
So
I'll pull them.
when you're putting something away, it's not like you're just putting one away. So like you'll have one, maybe it's a 6, like you said, 6 to 8 months down the road, you might have it again, see where it's at, that kind of thing.
Well, I think
Yeah, and I
about
have to like it.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I would think so. Yeah.
And I feel like with you, because I'm the same way, once it's smoking at what you think is its peak, you smoke all of them. Right. And I think about the
Without a
RL.
doubt.
Because
you've been raving about the RL, which we sold our last box of today to somebody. And I told him, I was like, man, I smoked this Saturday, the Tatuaje RL 22, the Corona.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah.
I told him, I was like, I smoked this thing Saturday because a buddy told me to do it, and it is smoking unbelievably. And I have to imagine, knowing you, that if you had any RLs laying around, you said, screw it, I'm smoking them because they're perfect.
Yeah, I've been running through them. I found a shop by me that had a stack of them. This place called Main Street Cigars in Woodbridge, New Jersey. They had like 8 or 9 boxes left over. And on my birthday, I went down there and I bought a box and I smoked one and it was pretty good. And then for whatever reason, like within like a couple weeks, I went back and I smoked another one. And I was just like, I think I told you, I had like text you and I was just like, dude, these cigars are on, they're all cylinders right now. They finally reached their peak. And I've smoked one every day since then. I have a couple left uh, in my humidor, and I've handed them out to a couple of the guys at the shop. And I've just been like, here, smoke this. They're like, I had that before. It was okay. I was like, yeah, no, this is a different cigar now. And that's one of the things that I don't think that people realize about aging cigars wholly is that an aged cigar isn't the cigar that it was when it was released. An aged cigar is the maturation of that cigar now. Like there's the upfront flavors, the spice, the fullness, the strength that you get initially. I imagine it's the same, Ethan or Jason, depending on, Jason, I think that you don't drink spirits all that often, right? So this would be more for Ethan, but
Not straight, more of a cocktail guy.
yeah. So, I mean, my brother tells me about it all the time. Like when you open a bottle and you let it breathe, some of that initial sting or some of that initial alcohol, some of that initial like uptake that you're getting from the bottle just being cracked or uncorked, goes away. and everything kind of mellows out a little bit. They have add a touch of water, let it oxidize a little bit.
Yep.
Same goes with cigars. If they're under the right humidity, the right temperature, and you let them go, they will meld. But I think that is what you're looking for. You're not looking to age it to a point where nobody has it anymore, because then I think it's going to taste like nothing. I think that you're just looking for it to be rounded to the point that you enjoy it the most.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of spirits, I'm actually drinking tonight the bottle of the still or subtle spirits that you gave me for Christmas. And
What do you think of that?
well, that's what I was going to say. The bourbon community has a term called neck pour, right? And it's the first pour of the bottle that's sitting in the neck, and how it's different from the rest of the bottle. And it's exactly what you were talking about. I remember the neck pour of this being awesome, but it was hot. It was spicy. And that makes sense because this is it's 115.6 proof.
Good Lord.
Yeah.
Good night.
But now with time, it's opened up, and this is one of those cool bottles. They only made 138 of them. It was barrel 77, aged for 10 years, MGP whiskey. Really, really good. Thank you again for this. But I agree with
you're
you.
welcome.
Because I think with cigars, I think the reason that people like aged cigars is because the spice falls off. And I feel like the average consumer palate is so mild to medium that aged cigars get mild to medium because the spice falls off. And so then they think, and I hate this word, that it's smooth.
Smooth, baby.
Right. And
so smooth.
And they're not looking for the nuance that you or I may be looking for in a cigar. Because I remember, and I don't know if you got them from Hawaii or not, but I remember we had Capaguan Guapos, Corona Gordas. We had those P1s. We had JJ Maduros. Yeah. Even the El Centurion, which the reason I bought that box originally is because my favorite cigar of all time is the El Centurion Lancero.
Lancero, right? Yeah.
But it's funny because if you go on Half Wheel, they actually just did a redux of that cigar, and they gave it like a 93 originally. But in the most recent redux, they said, I think it was an 87.
Yeah.
And they were like, it's past its prime because they do reach that point. But with aged cigars, I'm going to use the Karloff for an example, right? So sure. I never smoked the original Karloff because we weren't a big Tatuaje account at the time. And so we didn't get it. And I remember it being one of your favorite cigars of all time. And I remember I bought a box from you and I was able to smoke it new or aged. And it was very nuanced. It was delicious. It still had some spice and body to it, but it wasn't very meaty or anything like that. Well, he just did Boris Karloff, and I remember texting you when we got that in, and I was like, holy shit, man, this is meaty, it's full-bodied, it's peppery, and you texted me back and said, that's great because that's the same blend like that he used originally. He hasn't tweaked it at all. Oh, and I was like, wow, that's crazy because I never knew that because I didn't get to experience it. But I smoked through or gave away about half that box, and I put the other half back because I know what it's going to become now because I was able to smoke the original blend aged out thanks to you.
Yeah, I think that cigar is a great example of what I'm talking about because you have a similar experience that what I have with it. And I remember when Karloff first came out and I smoked it, I had the same exact feeling and understanding of that cigar the way that I had of the TAA 2020. And it was just like, this cigar is like, balls to the wall. Like everything about it is big, but I knew that wasn't the way it was going to remain. And the fact that I was able to smoke the Boris Karloff and then be able to compare the two and go, yeah, this is spot on. Like this is exactly what I remember. Like this feels like a little bit like a time machine for me because I didn't think that I would get to smoke this cigar fresh again. And I think that people sometimes miss out on the best parts of new releases, which is smoking them right when they come out. Because when they're at their peak and they have the most oils on them, the least amount is dissipated. I mean, that's the intention that the blender had when it hit your hand was something like this. The their foresight or the way that they could look at it in the future or how it's going to age, or what their hopes for it to age. When it hits that point, I think that they know that they've hit a home run. But I don't think that a lot of they sell cigars to sell cigars. They're not intending for them to sit on shelves for a really
Right.
long, extended period of time. And the fact that we get to smoke aged cigars or find aged cigars is sort of an anomaly, uh, because it just kind of shows what each shop was either hanging on to or selling more of or less of, or what's gotten forgotten about, or what people gravitate towards initially. I mean, maybe some people are trying to get newer, fresher cigars, while other people are, they don't want that box that's been sitting for a couple of years. Um, and I
That's
often attribute. Go ahead, Jason.
well, what I was gonna say is that's what I find so interesting about the store you guys have it about in Hawaii. It's like, was it, why do you have these? Like, what was there just never a customer demand, or did you specifically hang on to these, or what was it about him? And or is he's a kooky fella and that's what he did?
Well, that goes
I
without
truly
saying.
don't know. Yeah, I truly don't know what his intention was, because he already had a spreadsheet of what
So
what was out
he
there.
had clearly thought about what he
Yeah.
had enough
Yeah.
to
Well, let's
document what he's got and to
let's
be able to send it to you.
say this real quick, because you took advantage of this, Mike. Larry was the same way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When COVID happened, I know, Mike, you bought an original box of El Rey from us, like 07 El Rey.
Yep.
You bought Pepin torpedoes from us. You bought some Letelier stuff from us, some Tatuaje stuff from us that had been sitting upstairs for a long time. And I think some people are just like that.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Yeah. They just like hoarding it. And I think Larry, God bless him, love him to death. I think Larry really thought they would be worth more money if they were aged longer.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, in the cigar industry,
that's
not the case unless you're selling on the secondary market, which is obviously illegal, and he can't do because he could lose his business if he did that.
Yeah, and let's be honest, secondary markets have only come.
Yeah, they just became a thing recently.
Became a thing in the last few years. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's true. I mean, I definitely benefited from one, Larry being bold enough to create La Colonia, and then also with the stuff that he left behind, because La Colonia, your cigar, the original release from 2013, I thought was one of the best kept secrets in the cigar industry. The fact that those boxes even existed, and then when the newer, or the 25th anniversary came out of that cigar, I liked it because it was a different representation, but the same standard as what you had for the original release. So like I think the wrapper was different, right? Or was it the same?
Yep. No,
Yeah,
it's different. It was the new Corojo 2012 on the anniversary.
And I'll be honest with you, I think that the new Corojo 2012, I think that that's a good example of innovation right there, because that wrapper reminds me more of the older stuff than the regular stuff that they have putting out on it does now. Like there's a savoriness and there's a richness with the new wrapper that I think has kind of fallen to the wayside of the regular Corojo 99 that they're used to using. And I don't know if it's because they have so many accounts and they're going through so much Corojo, or what it might be, and maybe 2012 is a little bit less, but you remember the blend, you tasted it, and then when the new representation came out, you were like, yeah, this is different, but this tastes more like what we're going for.
Correct.
And I think that that's more or less what you're supposed to do. That's the thing that keeps people happy and makes them excited about the releases that you put out, is something that like is familiar but different.
Yeah, and I think that's the qualm that I have with Cuban cigars, and I think you'd agree with me on this. Cuban cigars are the one exception to what we're talking about right now, because Cuban cigars have to be aged for them to be good, right? Because Cuba is pumping out so many cigars that they're not properly fermenting and aging the tobacco and the cigars after they're rolled. And you have to, if you get a box of new Cuban cigars, realistically, you need to put them in the humidor for at least 2 years before they're ready to smoke, because they suck.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting to compare where we're at in the industry versus Cuba, because let's be honest, customers, especially those who are getting into cigars or don't know a lot about them, they still want Cuban cigars. They still ask for Cuban cigars. And it's like, you obviously don't get it, because what you're smoking, if you get a fresh box of Hoya de Monterey Epicure number 2s, which is one of my favorite Cuban cigars, it's not what the Cuban manufacturers intended it to be right out of the box.
Right.
It's not like
Right.
Karloff or La Colonia or whatever, because they weren't able to age it for as long as they wanted to, because they had to get the money for it, because they don't have any other cash crops in Cuba, or really any other way to make money for that matter. And so it's an interesting dichotomy between looking at where the industry is now in America and comparing it to the Cuban market.
I think that that's a huge thing that people, I mean, with Cuban cigars, people always ask me, like, what's your favorite Cuban? Or they'll be like, I can get Cuban cigars. I have a connection, or I have something. And my response before any of the other stuff, like, my response before me telling them, like, we can't verify it, or like, I don't know who your connection is, or I'm not going to give you $700 on like a whim or a wish.
That's right.
Like, is always, I'm looking for a cigar, not an investment. Like, I'm
Yeah.
looking to buy a cigar and smoke it now. I'm not looking for a cigar that I hope is good later. Like, I'm not looking for the diamond in the rough, in that regard when it comes to aged or not aged cigars. Like, I think that we're very fortunate now, the way that the New World market has kind of escalated and picked up and become what it is in America, that when you go to the shelves and you pick up a cigar, no matter what your brand might be, that cigar more times than not is good to go. Like, there's no waiting on it. There's no, I hope that it's going to draw. There's no, there's no second guessing it. You just know that what you're purchasing is what you're going to get. And I think more often than not, that's what people want.
Yeah, because I mean, at the end of the day, you're in the cigar industry now. We're obviously in the cigar industry. We need product that is going to sell today, that people are going to smoke today, that is going to perform correctly today, because that's what keeps food on our table, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine, like, okay, let's say Cuban cigars were legal, right? And we get past the initial rush of, holy shit, Cuban cigars are legal, give me everything you have. Like, let's say we're a year down the road. Well, one, they're expensive, right? They're 30, 40, 50, 60, $100 a piece. But two, all of us here know that those Cuban cigars aren't ready to smoke today.
Yeah.
Right. And I would be very hard pressed to sell someone that cigar and be like, this is going to be the best cigar you've ever smoked because it's Cuban, because deep down, I know that is not true. And I think that eventually the consumers would realize that, and we'd be in a tough spot. And so would Cuba. Right? Because right now, the only reason that Cuban cigars sell so much is because, in my opinion, anyways, is because they're forbidden fruit.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
People can't get them. They're hard
People
to get.
want what they can have.
That's
correct. Right. And it's the same thing with bourbon, with Pappy Van Winkle and all the allocated stuff, right? Like, and it's human nature. And we talk about that a lot, but it's just so interesting to think that, if Cuban cigars were legal, it'd be great at first. But in my opinion, for the long term, I really don't know how much they would sell. I don't know. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Cuban has the allure and it would take 10, 15, 20 years for the industry to sort itself out. But we all know here that the cigar that you're smoking, I'm smoking, if you were smoking, it would be better than any Cuban cigar that we would have on the shelf.
I've talked about this before. I have made my opinion, I think, known on this. If tomorrow, there was some sort of executive order that lifted the embargo on Cuba, Cuba can't handle. Cuba doesn't have an infrastructure, an economy, an employment force, or anything like that could do what the DR does or what Nicaragua does. I've told you that Nicaragua makes the best cigars, in my opinion. The country has been beaten down over these years because of this embargo. It would take years and years of economic investment and time to get them to a place to make cigars that for which the quality it should be.
Yeah.
In in my opinion.
Well, and realistically, Altadis would, in my opinion, because they're half owned by the Chinese, but they have the rights to all the Cuban names for the most part, they would get everything.
Yep.
And so you would see every JRs and Casa de Monte Cristo in the country pumping these things out, and then maybe CI with the Cohiba and whatnot, and Punch and Partagas and whatnot.
You would
like
immediately see the buy a box of Cubans and get a 5-pack for free, or
Yeah.
buy 2 and get 1 free, and
yeah.
all that kind of stuff.
But, as a cigar retailer and a cigar geek, part of me wants it to happen and part of me doesn't, right? Because I kind of want people to realize that this Tatuaje is 10 folds better than any Cuban you could buy right now. But then there's also the part of me that says we could make a lot of money.
Sure. And there is also this like kind of underlying allure that is the Cuban cigar that keeps the cigar world in general, when you bundle everybody together, kind of in this kind of mystique of luxury.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Because it is a luxury product, right? So that mystique that is the Cuban cigar, whether you're smoking Cubans or not, has this kind of like, this kind of luxury to it that, like you said, a lot of people want it because of the forbidden fruit, but it just has this kind of blanket of like that over top of it.
I agree. And I think about, we had a customer, and Mike, you get more customers like this than anybody that
Where's
I know
your Cubans,
of.
man?
No, actually, surprisingly, but yes.
Hey, man, where's your Cubans at, bro?
Where are they at, brother?
Can't do that. Since when?
Yeah.
I don't know, 1964, roughly.
That's exactly right. I had a lady come in the shop the other day, and she said, I need to get cigars. We're having a North Carolina Educational Superintendent Conference.
What?
And so from
the superintendent
2 weeks ago. Did I tell you about this?
No.
Yeah. So all the North Carolina educational superintendents were meeting, and she was like, I'm tasked with bringing cigars for some people. And I said, what's your budget? And she said $200 a cigar. And I was
Let's
like, oh,
go.
shit. All right. That's what I'm talking about.
I have so many of those, it would make your head spin, man. Here we go.
Right. So I pointed her to Padron, and she got a 45th and 80th and number 9. And she said, are these the nicest cigars you have in the humidor? And I was like, in the humidor, yes. But actually, I have a couple Padron Fuente Legends left. And I told her the story of it. And I was like, they're $180 a piece. And she was like, I'll take it. And I was like, okay,
You
cool.
did not tell me about this.
Yeah, I was like,
we're
okay.
out of them now?
We have one left.
Oh, I have one left. Gotcha.
I was like, okay, great. But the reason she bought it was because it was expensive. And I feel like your luxury point is true. And I think about the story that you told me, Mike, of the gentleman that came in and was like, I want the most expensive thing that you have. And he bought a box of Opus X Scorpions and a box of, I don't think it was Monte Cristo Diamantes, the double Diamante, but he spent like $1,800, pulled out a black card and was like, and he didn't know a damn thing about cigars, right? Like, no. I know you see that a lot. And I feel like you would see it even more if Cuban cigars were legal. And that, like I said, it's great for the bottom line, but I don't know how good it would be for the consumer in general.
I think that there's this, I definitely have had those experiences, and I've definitely had people come in and just say, like, you don't have anything better. And I don't know what they mean by that. Like, because it's not super expensive, like, then it can't be good. But that's not the case. There's a lot of times that I'd rather smoke a $9 cigar over a $100 cigar, just based on the way that the cigar is built and what it was intended for and what my palate needs and wants. And I think that the consumer at that particular stage, like if there was Cuban cigars in the humidor, the consumer has to take some of the responsibility for what they're doing, because they're demanding this thing and then they finally get it. And then when it doesn't turn out to meet all their expectations, they want to put the blame on somebody. But in actuality, it's like, hey, this is what you asked for. There's part of this that is on you for wanting that. And to be honest with you, I don't know where Cuban cigars would fit in New World humidors nowadays, because they're exclusively, you know, they're very medium cigars.
Yeah,
There's not a
absolutely.
lot of really full-bodied Cubans out there. Um, and I don't think that they necessarily have the infrastructure to be able to facilitate what somebody like Don Pepin or the Garcias and like AJ Fernandez and some of these other guys. I mean, these guys are putting out millions of cigars a year, like, and they're not even batting an eye at it. They're just getting bigger. They have the mechanism, they have the infrastructure, they have the facilities to create what this is. And the most important part about that for everybody to remember is the consistency of the product each time they release it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're never going to fall too far off where you were at the last time you smoked that cigar when you smoke it again, or you pull it from a new box, depending on where the batch was from. Like, there's consistency both in restaurants and in the cigar industry, anything that really has to do with taste. I mean, McDonald's has proved it. You give them enough of a consistent product, you could sell 1 billion of whatever this thing is. And cigars are much the same, only on a much higher price scale. I try and tell people all the time, every time you buy a cigar, it's like you're buying a bottle of wine, because the price sort of equates
Yeah.
the same way. So whatever you choose to smoke, you're you're basically saying that this is what I'm set out to enjoy for the next hour, hour and a half. This is what I'm going to spend my 9, 10, 11, $12 on, and my next 2 hours on. And I think that gets lost because they are so readily available in so many different stores that I don't think that people look at the consistency between product in between stores, between batches, as often as they probably should. Um, and it's a lot why I look at cigars sometimes by box date. Like, one of the things that I always like to do is, like, I like to check the box date if the company puts them on the bottom of the box, because for them it's a quality control thing, and they want to make sure that if there's anything wrong, they can go back and find that lot and check with people to make sure that they're not experiencing or having bad experiences with the cigar. But for me, it's an indication of what crop I want to smoke above all other crops. Like, it's just like the vintage on a bottle of wine. For me, it's kind of like, this is an indicator that if I find another box just like this, I'm going to get the same exact experience. And I guess that's what I'm chasing more than anything else, is consistency. Is a certain flavor profile that knocked me back or made me take a look at the cigar and go, wow, this is really good. And then trying to replicate that as many times as I can.
Yeah. And we talk about that a lot. And I will tell you, just so you know, we just got this Cajonu 2012 Habano box in today. I don't know what the box date is on it, but it's whatever they're shipping right now. I'll text it to you. This batch is smoking unbelievably. Like, you need to smoke it. And it's good to see. But we talk about this a lot because, unfortunately, when it comes to consistency, some batches are just better than others, right? Just like some vintages of wine are better than others. And the mass producing brands do a better job at mitigating that, right? Like a Romeo and Juliet Reserva Real Toro is going to smoke the same today as it did 10 years ago. Whereas a Tatuaje Brown Label, where Pete is dealing with different crops and everything like that, there are going to be differences, right? Like, some brown labels smoke a little bit better than others. And so you and I end up chasing that. We chase the box dates. We talk about how, box dates of August 2nd, 2023, like that brown label crop, that batch of cigars is exactly what we're looking for. And that's the cigars that I end up putting back because, one, I want to have them ready to smoke whenever I want one. But two, I also want to see what's going to happen over time with that. And I wish more companies did that. That is a thing that has gone to the wayside, in my opinion. Pepin came from Cuba, And so he continues to do that because that's kind of ingrained in him and instilled in him. But like Aganorsa doesn't do that. I looked at a box of JFR Lunatic something or another's the other day just to see if there was a box date on there, and there wasn't. It just said Aganorsa Puro whatever on it. And that's fine, but it is funny because that's the geeky part of me coming out, right? That's the thing that we bond over. That's the experience that we bond over. Like, have you smoked the brown label batch from August of 2023? Because that cigar is unbelievable, right?
Yeah, I think that that's like that's something that we, there's like a new like another layer of like skin or epidermis for us that like we have to go under like to make this geekier than we have already made it. Like, now we're looking at box dates and talking about crop months and all this other stuff, but
Yeah.
it's but to me, when you love something like this and you're passionate about something like this, like you want to make the most sense of it that you possibly can. And box dates make sense to me because cigars they're not cheap. They're a lot of money, and they are an investment when you're buying, especially a box, because even if you're going to smoke them over a month's period, you're putting out that kind of money for that experience 20 times, 25 times, however many times it might be when you purchase a box. And I always want to make sure that like I am doing my due diligence to find the best box that there is, or the wrappers look a certain way, or there's a certain amount of red or blotching or something. I don't think that that is the norm, but on the geek side of things, that is something that like I'm constantly and always looking at, because as a chef, it was the same thing. Like I knew where to get certain vegetables because of what farm grew them and how they grew them. And I think that's why I gravitate to certain tobacco houses, because I can trust the production of the crop and what they're doing in the fermentation to deliver the same experience, time and time again.
Yeah. I remember, I don't remember when this was, but I remember you telling me about it. You and I have bonded over cooking because I love to cook, and especially barbecue. And I remember you telling me about a farm that has Boston butts, which, make barbecue, um, that fed their pigs all acorns, right? It was like the Wagyu of pork. And I remember you telling me about this, and I still want and to try a Boston butt because of the regiment that they put their pigs under before they take them to slaughter. Because I want to know what that meat tastes like, knowing that they were fed acorns the entire time, right? And it's the same thing with tobacco. When you know a company, and we'll use my father again, takes the time to box date it and talk about the harvest, or Placencia, right? With 149, 146, 151, like they deemed that crop worthy of putting the box date on there or making an entire line out of that harvest. It makes me want to buy it, right? Because I geek out over it. I know that if they're willing to put it out there that like, we did this to our tobacco or pigs, right? Like,
Right.
this is what it, like, this is the best.
Yeah.
Right. And it feels like a lost art almost.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of, that's one of the things that like I'm curious about with this new thing being released at PCA, this AI blended cigar.
Oh, I didn't see this.
Who is that from?
Yeah, this company. Let me see if I can find it here. I forget the name of the company. Is it Cigar Public or
Yes, it is.
Bentley Tobacco?
Oh, it's Bentley. It's Carney's tobacco.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So they've gone to, I guess they've been prepping this over the course of like 12 to 18 months, maybe more. But they're having a blended cigar done completely by AI. And I wonder, one, if what it's going to cost. Like, is this cigar going to be a tech product, or is it going to be a cigar? And I wonder how it's going to match up to cigars that are blended by human beings and people that have lived, grown, and had their hands in the dirt with tobacco since they were kids. And I'm really curious to see what the differences and the similarities are and how they're bringing these things together. But I I think that this is a tradition passed down uh, over time. And one of the nice things about it is the nostalgia of that is like the fact that if you want to learn tobacco, it really has to be passed down to you. It's not something that you really find in a book.
That is the truth, right? Because we talk about, hey, can we announce the new store on this podcast?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. So we're opening a new store in Durham.
Congratulations.
Thank you, sir.
And with the new store comes new employees and a whole, the whole gambit of training. And I was talking with Vicky, who runs the Mebane store, who was going to be over the Durham store, and she was like, how do we teach cigars essentially to new employees? And it's like, there's no good place for a new person who's getting in cigars to go and learn about all of the history and the stories of even the last 10 years of what's happened in the cigar industry. Like, we keep using them as example, but like the divorce of Aganorsa and my father and the difference that it made in the industry, you can't go learn that by reading a book. You have to hear that from somebody, or how Eduardo Fernandez got started, or AJ, or any of these people like Padron. Even there's a customer that comes in and he's a pipe smoker, but he used to be a cigar guy and he lived down in Miami, and he used to buy Padron, what I assume to be his core brand, for $2 a cigar off the streets while they were selling the bundles on the side of the road in Caliocho, right? Like, that history isn't taught in a book. There's not a website you can go to. As good as Half Wheel is about with their editorials and their news articles and whatnot, it would take you months to go through them and digest it. And even then, you still wouldn't understand it. Right. Yeah. And so this industry is very much, like you said, a mouth to mouth teaching industry. And I'm thankful for the times that you and I have had to, talk on FaceTime and whatnot, where we've been able to share stories and whatnot, because it's helped me as a retailer grow in my knowledge and understanding of the industry, which then as a retailer relates to sales. And that's the big thing that we're here for. But a story sells, right? Like, we had a wine tasting today where
absolutely
someone came in and was telling the story of the winery and the person that owned it and how it was all interconnected and whatnot. And I was like, and they had this bottle that was Italian, and I can't remember the Italian name, but it was like the story of the badger or something like that. And it was like, okay, the badger is basically Robin Hood, right, in Italy. And the badger used to steal from the rich to give to the poor. And I was like, man, that is a great selling point. Like, I could tell this to a customer and get them invested in this bottle, just like I can get them invested into this cigar. And they feel like if they don't buy it, they're missing out on the history of it.
Right. Yeah, I think that's the story is always your selling point. It's I think that there's this unfortunate thing that happens, that people realize that the story is what can help sell a product, but then they don't concentrate on the product as much. And I wish that they would concentrate on both equally. Like, if they had a good product and a story behind it, like that, even at a slow growth, that's where you get the Padrones and the Fuentes from. Like, they made a good product and they pounded the pavement and they sold cigars out of the trunks of their car or at car washes or someplace else. And they built this brand through perseverance. And they built this brand through what they've come to love, be passionate about, and enjoy. And now it is the brand that it is today. I think that there are so many people out there nowadays that are just like, just put a band on it. Like, I'll buy a second, I'll put a band on it. People don't know.
I hate to even bring them up, but we saw that during COVID with Bravada. They were buying seconds and just putting these bands on them: Cookie Monster, Hamburger, Incredible Hug, Trail Mix. And it was like
Malibu Rick, bro.
Malibu Rick. Yeah, like You're the wabbit.
You're the Webbit, yeah.
Yeah, and they were getting cease and desist left and right.
Yeah,
I mean,
it didn't go a
and
week before they were getting sued by everyone.
no, but they were such bullshit, for lack of better words. And it's like, man, if you just put out a good product and stop trying to pull the rug over the consumer's eyes, you would sell a lot more cigars, in my opinion.
Yeah, I
And
think that's what I think Placencia kind of like got on the bandwagon with. Like they had always provided tobacco for people, but never like really made their own cigar. And then years ago when they came out with the original, that original organic, whatever it was, cigar that they still sell today, their Reserva, it was like $8 or $9 and it smoked fantastic. And that was sort of like the jumping point or the gate opener for them to release Alma Fuerte and Alma Fuego and all these other higher end cigars. But I think that people caught on to that and they had a story, right? Like even when they came out, they had a good product, but then they also had a story. And their story was that they provided the tobacco that you like to smoke in all these other cigars, but now they're taking that tobacco and making their own with those cigars. And those two things ran synonymously in parallel with one another and now they're the brand that they are today. Um, and I think that that's kind of more or less what I'm looking for in a story. A lot of people nowadays, even with these smaller brands, they've been around 20 years, but you tell people sometimes, oh, I smoke Tatuaje, and they're like, who is that? And I'm like, how do these people not know who Tatuaje is? They said they've been smoking cigars for 20 or 30 years. But I think that the consumer gets very comfortable in what they know as a cigar or what they know as what they want, and it's very shaky. Maybe you guys can weigh in on this. It's very hard to get somebody who knows what they want to smoke something different even for a couple times.
yeah, I mean, I agree completely. And that, kind of leads us into our next topic, sort of uh, trends in the cigar industry, right? And I always think about Fuente when I think about this. If we don't have short stories, I have nothing that I can recommend to somebody because Fuente has the market of Cameroon, right? So if we don't have Hemingways or Don Carlos, it's like, where do we go? Okay, maybe Aladino Cameroon, great cigar, but it's Honduran. It's not Dominican. I think about Padron. If we don't have 1926s or 64s for whatever reason, really the only thing out there is Perdomo because they're the only vertically integrated company that uses all Nicaraguan tobacco in their cigars, right? And it becomes frustrating at the end of the day as a retailer because I wish there were more companies out there that I could go to and say, hey, if you like a short story, here's this. But there's not. But that's at the same time, it's a double-edged sword. That's also what makes these companies great, right? Like I saw a Perdomo posted on their Instagram today or yesterday that they're the third largest selling brand in America right now, which is crazy, but also makes sense given the attention of detail that they pay to all of their
Detail,
cigars.
brand awareness, all
Yeah.
that stuff. Yeah.
And it was Arturo Fuente, then Padron, then Perdomo.
Yep.
And it's like, sometimes I wonder why companies, and I won't name anybody, but I have one in mind, don't do that more, right? Because you see what a company who has invested in their infrastructure and their quality and control and consistency, you see what can happen if you do that. So why aren't you doing it now, right? But with that being said, transitioning, because this is something I like talking with you about. What, if anything, are some cigar trends that you're seeing in the Northeast? Because what I found is that, like, Tatuaje is a great example. Tatuaje in the Northeast has a stronghold, right? Tatuaje in the Northeast, people know what Tatuaje is. People know who Pete Johnson is. They like Tatuaje. Whereas down here, we're preaching the gospel of Tatuaje in the humidor to people. And it's like, okay, I smoke Flor de las Antillas or La Palencia or whatever, but I don't know what Tatuaje is. I don't know who Pete Johnson is. I don't realize that he's married to Pepin's daughter, right? So, what are some trends that you're seeing in the Northeast right now that are driving sales?
Um, well, I'll be honest. I think that like one of the things that you brought up briefly just before, and uh, one of the things that's going to carry over now, like not just from the north, but also just like it's going to be an all-encompassing sort of thing that I think that people are going to be after is education. I think that like education on the brands, education on the tobacco, education on the experience, education on how to properly cut, light, be inclusive in that sort of way, like by showing people the ropes and like bringing them the experience that you have with a cigar. I think that that's one of the things that's definitely going to be a big trend moving forward. And I think that that's going to be a big sales driver. I really think that the education piece too is going to be because the generations are shifting. You know, like there was a stronghold on a certain amount of cigars for a long period of time because your dad and your grandfather smoked cigars and they still smoke cigars. So they go back to the store and they buy the cigars that they always bought. But now there's a billion new brands, you know, and me being a millennial, you know, like on my way to 40 and, you know, knowing what I know and growing up during the time that I grew up in, like we saw like the the spawn of like artisanal and like new American restaurants and like you know private batch and small batch labeling and this more personal in tune with product than just what everybody else was buying. And I think that like part of the story of your brand now has to kind of coincide with that. And I think that like education from the retailer's point of view to the consumer is going to be a big sales driver because people want to know more about what they're buying. They want to know more about what they're enjoying.
And that's what I was going to ask you. Where do you think that education is going to come from? So for me, it's part of the reason that we've gotten deeper into social media, deeper into doing videos and doing the podcast was for a way for us to connect with our customer, connect with new customers, but to start to bridge that gap, to educate on what we're carrying, what we're doing. Do you see it more from your and mine and Ethan's perspective from the point of sale to the consumer, or do you think you're going to see, or do you want to see more of that kind of education, if you will, from the manufacturer standpoint? Some do it better than others. Some are completely and totally ingrained into we don't do that. That's ridiculous. You know, we're not. You're not going to see us on the internet or whatever it is. We see it do it much better than others.
I think that the most effective way that you'll see it take hold is from uh, directly from retailer to consumer, because you have their attention. You know, they're present in the transaction that they're about to take part in. They're present in like the information that you're giving them about the product that they're going to purchase. You know, and you got to think that like they're not going to remember everything that you gave to them, but they're going to remember something. Even if they remember that like there was a great story behind this, I have to ask the guy next time I
That's right.
come.
Yeah.
Or, you know, like I have to have him reiterate that for me so that I can tell my friend about it. And, you know, I have something to talk about at the smoking circle when I go there this afternoon. Um, and I think that from a brand's perspective, I think that I would like to see it more often, especially now with having to hire as often or people getting into cigars. Like there's always a discussion about like we take the most, you know, we take the most care of our tobacco using Cuban methods of blah 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 to create XYZ. And it's a very like short, all-encompassing sort of this is what you get from our brand. But every brand says the same thing. And I think like with a little bit more information, I think with a little bit more attention, I think, you know, just with a little bit more education on their part, even if it was for people like us to come to the factories and see what's happening and kind of like be a part of the day to day so that that can translate to the sales floor, or to have something on their website that says what the blends are or what you can expect to experience, just something for people to go off of as like a marker. I think that that would be that's a big help.
Yeah. So interestingly enough, Omar DeFrias, who is the owner of Fratello Cigars, which we
Hmm.
used to carry back in the day here at the Pipe and Pint. He came in the shop the other day, and we were talking about possibly getting their cigars back in the store. And he told me that something that they do is they mandate an educational session with all of the employees of a new account so that they can talk about their cigars, to the point where they even give the stores a credit so that the store owner can give the cigars to their employees so that they can smoke them and understand the cigar so that they can better sell them. And it's something that I wish that more people did and more companies did. And it was funny because the very next day, the national sales manager for Aladino came in and he was like, "What can we do to be better? What can we do to help you guys?" And I mentioned this to him, and he was like, we have these educational sessions and Zooms and whatever with JRs and with CI and with Thompson every single quarter, to where we talk to their higher ups about what's coming, about what their employees need to know and whatnot. And he was like, "Yeah, we should do that with every shop." And it's a lot of work. And I understand that. But if retailers are responsible for teaching consumers about the cigar, how better to learn about that cigar
Yeah, the
than from the
manufacturers
horse's
should be
horse's
responsible,
mouth?
hold that responsibility to, you know, pass that information along. We can't, and we're not giving the best if all we're going off is some sort of like pamphlet sales sheet.
Right. And Perdomo does a great job with factory tours, with providing their retailers an opportunity to go down to Nicaragua and see the operation. But sometimes retailers can't go to Nicaragua, whether it be because of family or whatever, or the timing doesn't work, you name it. Or I got the
I
flu,
got the flu.
this guy. Um, and it's cool, but at the same time, I almost wish that these companies would provide that virtually now, right? Like you
Yeah.
have the opportunity, we have the technology to be able to take video and audio and whatnot to make a 30-minute presentation about our company, about our cigars that retailers can take advantage of. And in my opinion, the good retailers would take advantage of it, right? Because we know
Well,
there's a lot of bad retailers out there. There's a lot of retailers who treat this as a hobby, who just want to have somewhere for their buddies to smoke. But the people like us who are trying to educate consumers and also make money doing it, we want to know every single thing that we can. We want to have every single tool available to us to be able to use to sell your cigars. And that makes all of us more money. And I wish more retailers would do that,
yeah,
or
I think that that's
manufacturers.
big. That kind of piggybacks onto, the education portion. I think that like with AI and augmented reality and a few of the other things that we have at our availability right now, I think that you could, I'm not saying that they're going to or whether or not they think it's important, but I think that that aspect of bringing people together somewhere, whether it be virtually or in person, is going to be another thing that kind of gets lumped into all this. I think that there might be, or there should be somebody that's has the foresight now to go, okay, like you, to your point, we have the technology now. How do we use this in a way that we can push our brand forward, or we can connect with more consumers, or we can, provide them with something that somebody else isn't going to provide them with. And I think that when you have the technology to do something like that, you're at the forefront of something, special. because not anybody else is doing it. And to be the first person to be able to do it, or to offer the consumer something that maybe they can't get to because they have the flu, or because they don't have the funds, or because of whatever reason. Like, if Pro Cigar all of a sudden has like a virtual reality ticket, I guarantee you some are going to sell.
Yeah, absolutely. Pro Cigar, Habanos Festival, whatever. I mean, I would take advantage of it, right? And I even think about PCA. Like, what if there's a retailer that an owner of a shop that only has one employee, being himself or herself, that can't get to PCA because they can't leave the shop? Like, they feel like they're missing out on so much. And so why not have it? Why not have the ability to, hey, we're going to have a virtual tour of PCA. We're going to talk to these guys. We're going to let you know exactly what's coming so that even if you can't make it, you can pay 1, 2, $300 and still feel like you're there. Because as we all know, these manufacturers are willing to offer the deals of PCA to those that don't go, but you still don't get the experience.
Yeah, you don't get the experience. You don't get to see, what's coming. You don't get to look at the things. That's a big part of it for us. Getting to see what's coming. Obviously, we have a good idea, but you want to talk about it and immerse yourself. That is the business that you're in.
Yeah, and I mean, I think about Larry again. Larry never went to PCA, or at least to my knowledge, he may have went one or two times, and he felt like he couldn't go because it was just him and another guy here at the store. And thankfully, Larry had good enough relationships with the manufacturers that they were willing to offer him the deals at PCA and tell him about the stuff. But he wasn't able to physically be there. And so he relied on Half Wheel or Cigar Aficionado or whomever to tell him, hey, Padron or Perdomo, my number one account, is coming out with a new cigar, and this is what it is. And I wish that we had that more in the industry.
Yeah.
I think that that's something that everybody, if they're not already thinking about it, should be thinking about it. I think that it benefits. I think it even benefits on like not your owners and your owner operators and your managers. Like, I think just like for the general sales associate to experience like what it's like in the cigar industry, like on a sales floor, like what it's like for you to buy something, or like to see what's coming out. I mean, I think that reinvigorates, how they feel about the industry and what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think about someone in your shoes, right, who is uh, a manager, assistant manager of a very large cigar store, and due to restrictions that you cannot help, you can't go to PCA.
He's on the move.
He is on the move.
Yeah.
Is
Sorry, I
going,
have
is on
to
the move.
let my dog out.
is he going pee? Oh, okay.
No.
The dog's going to pee.
I thought you were
That'd be
taking.
a
I
hell of a
thought you were taking us
that'd be
behind
a
the
hell of a
scenes. Good lord.
No.
flex right there.
No, I mean, there's nothing that impressive for me to show you guys.
But like you can't go to PCA, yet you are impacted by what is happening at PCA. And you're going to
Yeah.
have customers and consumers asking you questions that you're not going to have the answers to because you're not able to be there.
And that goes a little bit to the world is small right now with the internet, with social media. So a lot of these companies who pumping this stuff out, and then you take into account us retailers who are involved in putting out content or whatever it is. So like you can have a lot of your customers coming to you being like, oh, I heard X is coming, or this is coming, or are you getting it? What's the deal with it? And if you're not able to be a part of that, then you're left like feeling like you're on the outside looking in when it comes to those things. And you may very well get those, you have those relationships, but you feel like, I think I would at least feel like I would be on the outside of the bubble, if that makes sense.
Yep.
I think that it's funny how like all of these things are interconnected too, because the next thing that I would say is probably the one thing that a cigar company, brand, or shop, or lounge, what they can offer people that they can't get online. And this is this is paramount. It's the way that they should be looking at this as experience.
Yep.
Like experience is the conversation that you have with the guy that you meet at the event, or like the cigar that he hands you, or the people that you meet and the connections that you make there, or the laughs that you have or that you didn't think that you were going to have. All the things that, like, when you wake up the next morning, you're like, man, that was really fun. I think I'm going to go back. That you could buy the cigar someplace else online,
Yep.
and probably with no tobacco tax and no anything else, but you're lacking every interaction. It's singular. It's absent of. And I think, like, inclusion is another big thing that you're going to want, like, the cigar industry will be looking at, is like, how do we bring all these people together? Which is why PCA is a great thing for retailers, and the places there, or the events like Big Smoke and stuff, are great for consumers. But there's not a lot of that happening on a micro scale a lot lately. And I think that's because there's not a lot of, again, I think that I understand that brand owners are very busy people, but either a rep or somebody showing up at a shop or offering the event or offering something that they can do that's a little bit different, or that can get their name out there a little bit more, is something that adds to the experience. And it goes hand in hand with the retailer and with the brand owner. They're going to say, I was at a so-and-so event at this so-and-so shop, and those word of mouth interactions are worth more than however many email blasts you could put out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Well, while we're on the topic, because you brought it up, so we're a month away from PCA, and now
Right.
stuff is starting to. Ethan and I will be there, New Orleans. We were hoping to see you there. I know you can't make it.
Yeah,
That's
unfortunately.
unfortunate, but that's all right.
We had a couch for you, buddy, or we could, I just snuggled with you.
Oh,
It's fun.
this is a good dude right there. Yeah, you'd have interrupted my snuggles, but that's fine. It is what it is. That's how we like to keep it.
No one says that anybody's snuggles got to get interrupted. We could all just be.
Hey, you know what I mean? Yeah, that's good. But stuff's starting to leak out now, right? Like we kind of heard rumblings of what may or may not be coming, and we're starting to see things. So we've heard fairly big announcement that My Father's Honduran was going to be available. Whether we get to smoke it or not will be interesting to see.
Well, I think we will, because they're saying it's going to ship in May or June.
So that may be what I'm most interested in seeing there. We've got
I would agree.
We found out that AJ's
got a
New World 10th anniversary
coming. You just talked about the AI generated cigar. I don't know if Padron and or Fuente have anything new.
Padron has Fuente has the Sex Panther.
Sex Panther,
the Black Panther.
60% of the time it works every time.
Yeah.
And then Perdomo's Legacy
Aganorsa 25th, new sweet cap from Drew Estate.
There's going to be huge, I think, a real like swell of new stuff. Last year there was some new things. We saw the Dias de Gloria to Brazil. We saw AJ20. Finally we were getting the legends, but there wasn't as many like kind of jaw-dropping new stuff. I think there's going to be more of that this year. So I'd be curious as to what Ethan is most interested in. And I'd be curious, you, Mike, what you are most interested in coming out of that.
For me, it's got to be.
If you've heard rumblings of something different that maybe we haven't heard of what's coming, because this, you guys carry brands that we don't carry. We just don't have the room and stuff like that. So there's stuff coming from everybody that we'll get a chance to try, but we just don't know about.
I think the most interesting thing for me to try is definitely going to be, because of what I've experienced with this brand and how much I enjoy this brand, like going, throughout my cigar experience, is definitely the Honduran stuff out of My Father. Because a lot of people have asked me about that since the story broke, and they've said, like, do you think it's going to be good? And I said, I don't think a brand as notable as My Father, just having the honor of top cigar in the world on the top 25 of Cigar Aficionado, is going to make their first move be, let's release our new Honduran stuff, and it be a flop.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yep.
They have to know. And again, it goes back to the beginning of everything. It said in the article that, like, when Jaime and Pepin looked at the soil, that's what they were most interested in. its positioning, where it sat in Honduras, and why that was particularly special for what they were doing with tobacco. And I'm more or less curious what the price point is going to be, because I know that it's going to be a great experience. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to hold people to the Aladino standard when it comes to Honduran tobacco.
Yeah.
I think that they do an amazing job, and I think, like, when you talk about Honduran tobacco and you talk about Honduran companies, I think that Aladino is at the top of that list right now. And I think that, excuse me, I think that my father now being another big player in that area is going to be a game changer, and I'm really interested to see what they're coming out with that stuff. There's also, believe it or not, AJ is making a uh, the new Romeo y Julieta that's going to be coming out, I think, around the same time as PCA,
Okay.
and they have some really nice branding and stuff on it, but I'm not sure what the price point's going to be or what the actual flavor profile is going to be. But it's, again, the same but different. This is like a departure from the standard Romeo stuff to a more AJ profile. So I'm very curious to see how that's going to play out. And I just want to see what people say about this AI thing, this AI cigar. I want to know if people are allowed to smoke it, and if it comes up with anything interesting or familiar or different.
I don't know anything. I know of this company. I know that's been making in its rounds.
Yeah.
Is it Nicaraguan?
I don't know.
I
So it says
Since we're
here, Bentley Tobacco and Jonathan Carney of Bentley Tobacco have introduced the AI Cigar Project. This initiative involves the first complete use of artificial intelligence to craft a premier consumer-driven cigar experience. Bentley Tobacco will then work to bring the AI designer cigar from concept to reality. So it says collects data from surveys. They examine the cigar smoking experience. They'll determine the size, most preferable, tobacco origins, flavor profiles. So they have no actual information about the cigar except how they went about putting it together.
Gotcha.
So I'm gonna be a pessimist here. What is the story? What is the name of the story? My phone's being used as a camera, so I can't Google it. What is the name of the story of the guy that outworked the train? John Henry?
Yep.
It was John Henry. I'm very much John Henry in this this when we're talking about this, because every single part of me wants to just call bullshit on the whole thing.
It's
Like, cigars are a handmade, loving product. It's just like food, right? The number one ingredient in cooking is love, right? The Menu. Great movie. I know it's on your list, Mike. You need to watch
very good movie.
I know. Yeah.
But the love that goes into cigars makes them great. And I just don't know that you can take it away and replace it with AI. And I don't want to be proven wrong on it. I think that's the thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to smoke the AI cigar and say, holy shit, this is incredible.
Well, you're just gonna see a run of it then at that point, right?
Yeah, because I know at that point it's gonna
Change.
Exactly. It's gonna change the way things are done, and the love and everything that goes into a handmade product is going to dissipate. And as a geek, I will be heartbroken.
Well, I have a geek question for you on this particular in this particular area. If AI created it, is it considered a machine-made cigar?
Oh,
what an FDA question!
Very much an FDA question.
That's a great question.
Skynet.
I don't know. Yes and no, right? But okay, I want to use an example today of a cigar that I smoked, and I'm not going to mention the company, but that's also because I don't know the name of the company who made it. Yeah. One of the guys that works here has been talking to this small boutique company about like making a cigar or whatever, and who knows whether or not it comes to fruition. But he brought a sample with him, and he said he wanted a Connecticut cigar that had Connecticut flavors that was full bodied. And so what this company did was they made a Ecuadorian shade Connecticut wrapped cigar that had a San Andreas binder. I don't know what the fillers were. And it was the worst cigar I have smoked in a long time because it didn't know what it was going to be.
Did you
right?
did you tell this particular
I did.
person?
I did. I told him it was terrible because it didn't know if it wanted to be a more medium-bodied Connecticut that was still rich and creamy, but had some body and some spice to it, or if it wanted to be a full-bodied cigar that had a lot of spice but was balanced with cream. And I smoked like a quarter of it. It was so bad. And so I wonder with this AI thing, it's like, okay, the average consumer palate wants a medium-bodied cigar that's rich and creamy, but still has good body to it. And so we're going to make this Connecticut cigar with a San Andreas binder, and then it's just going to be shit because AI doesn't understand tobacco.
Right.
I'm curious to see. I mean, they have to be in some way, shape, or form. They would have to be testing this. You would think, right? Like they wouldn't be able to present a cigar that tasted like garbage that was created by AI if it wasn't going to sell.
One would think that, but you know as well as the two of us know that that's not always the case with some of these companies who try to put out things quickly or may have a shtick around.
Yeah, it's like a cooling ashtray. It's stupid. I am salty tonight.
I ordered that first ashtray, bro. Okay. Like, come on,
Did you pay $15,000 for it?
Maybe.
Good for you, man. It's going on the boat.
Yeah, I'm just I don't know, man. I'm curious about that thing just to see what the hell happens to it. But I mean, cigars are what you just said. They are everything that they are a handed down sort of tradition. I mean, like you had asked earlier, like how did I start smoking cigars? Like my grandfather smoked cigars and my dad smoked cigars and my uncle smoked cigars and now my father-in-law smoked cigars. And like, believe it or not, I had gotten handed cigars from like either not well kept humidors or shirt jackets, you know, that like were left in the closet that my dad forgot about and just like, here, you want to try a cigar? Have this. But my first premium was with my father-in-law years ago. And I remember smoking it with him. We had just gone to an Italian restaurant that was having a really bad night. And we had waited like 30 minutes until we started hearing screaming from the kitchen. And then we were like, let's get the hell out of here. And then we went to, we went to a local down here and we got a sandwich and we got a cigar. And he asked me, he said, you going to light your cigar? And I said, no. I was like, I don't really like cigars. And he was like, well, have you ever had a real premium cigar? And I said, I don't know what that means. And he said, just cut the cigar, light it. If you don't like it, you could leave it there. He's like, but at least try it. And I got like a quarter away through the first third. And he was like, so how's that cigar? And I said, you know, this whole thing is pretty goddamn peaceful. And he said, that's what's great about a cigar. And ever since that point, I've taken it to a completely different, you know, area of passion and obsession. And like now I'm involved in it the way that I'm involved in it now. But it's a passed down thing. Like, had I not been with somebody that smoked a cigar, would I have intentionally gone out and like looked it up? I don't know. But I know that somebody passed down what they enjoyed about it to me. And that's what's kept me going with this for as long as I've been going with it.
So what you're telling me is that your wife, when she got mad at you for putting $1,200 of aged cigars on a credit card, should have instead been mad at her dad.
That's exactly how you should frame that going forward.
I've thrown him under the bus a couple times. I've definitely been like, this is his fault, you know, and that doesn't make anything better.
Yeah, I understand. We're all married. We understand.
All right. Well, we've been going for 2 hours, so I'm going to get you out of here on one last question before we go. So we've touched on it a couple of times that you were a chef for 10 years. Is that right? Longer?
Yeah, 10 years.
So classically trained in France, right?
Ooh, baby.
Not in France. I was classically trained in French cuisine in New York.
Okay.
But then I went to Europe after that, and I cooked there.
Yeah, because you cooked, if I'm not mistaken, a meal for Emma Stone, right?
I did, yes.
My man.
Let's go. So the question is I've been seeing this going around the internet because of so last cigar, last meal. What are those two things? You're on, God forbid you're on death row. They're like, Mike, listen, you get your last meal and you get a cigar to go with it. What are those two things?
Wow. Uh,
That's a great question.
Thank you.
I'm gonna. Well, I mean, I'm gonna go with my everyday, probably ride or die sort of cigar. I'm gonna go with a Tatuaje Black Label Corona Gorda,
Okay.
and my last meal, I would say fresh baked bread, good whole butter, and it's a toss up between either my ideal burger or a steak. And I think that would be, and like a Caesar salad. Those would probably be that would probably be my last meal, kind of almost like classic steakhouse meal. I could like shove the steak into the bread if I wanted to, or I could
Yeah,
butter the steak
create
and
your own little steak sandwich there.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Some
And
manipulation. I
then
like it.
and then I think if I were to have like for dessert, I would definitely have tres leches cake for dessert.
Woo.
Um, and then I would smoke my cigar, and then I would get fried in the chair.
What about you? I'm curious since you asked the question.
Cigar, I don't think would come as a surprise, would be Opus 20th, the blue. That's my favorite cigar. Last meal wise is not going to be terribly different than Mike's. I think it would be a nice medium rare New York strip and probably baked potato. I'm not a salad person, as everybody knows. So though you can skip the Caesar, maybe just get me like can I, on your last meal, can you be like, hey, can I substitute the salad for like risotto or something like that? If I was alternately choosing, it wouldn't necessarily be burger. I think it would be pizza. Like, if you could get the best representation of, an Italian sausage style pizza, but yeah, a thick cut medium rare New York strip for me is kind of the way I would want to go out.
Yeah.
Well, now you have
I'm gonna turn my salad into French fries. Sorry.
Yeah, see, that's what I'm talking about.
Steak frites, baby.
I'm curious what yours is, Ethan. Yeah.
I know my last meal better than I do my last cigar.
Yeah.
Last meal would be ribeye on the bone, fresh baked bread. I'm a Caesar salad guy. I would want my mom's twice baked potato, asparagus with hollandaise, a lobster tail.
Okay, and all right, we're just adding things out there. Okay, gotcha.
And then
a large pizza and 2 cheese.
Right, that's exactly. Maybe some fried shrimp, calabash. Yeah, and then dessert. I'm a simple man. I want an ice cream, just cookies and cream ice cream with a fresh baked chocolate chip cookie on top.
See, dessert for me, just perfect New York style cheesecake is the way I would want to go as well.
You gotta come up here, man. The New York style cheesecake around this area is solid.
Yeah.
Cigar wise, honestly, I'd probably pick a Padron Exclusivo.
Okay.
That's probably it. As much as I love Tat and Aganorsa, if I could get La Colonia, it would be that. Or if I knew I could get a perfect brown label, it would be that. But I just love Padron Exclusivos.
Yeah.
Just love them.
Mike, we appreciate it, bud. It's your first time.
I appreciate you guys.
First time on, but not your last time on. So keep your schedule free. We'll let you know when the next one rolls around, but we really appreciate it, bud.
Will do, guys. I would love to do this again. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, man. Thanks, buddy.
See ya.